lads? Is it the sort of vibe that the South Africans are struggling with the travel, or
I understand people's point of view, but then you got to go back to the last 16. Think about Paul Munster, right? They're flown out to Durban, and it's taken them 3 weeks to get there, effectively. Let's say 4 weeks. They've been on the piss after the Six Nations as well. And they had to play in 25, 28, call it 35 degrees of heat with humidity in Durban last week. And ultimately, they got sunburnt, they had sunstroke, they lost the game. The Sharks didn't complain about that. And I don't think they're using it as an excuse, but, Harlequins, same thing, went down to Cape Town. And it is a fact, right? It's a factor of the tournament, and it's something that everyone's known since day one. So the fact that all three South African teams have lost this weekend, and they did have brutal travel. They're talking about, Oxenche and Etzebeth and all these monsters having to fly economy and doing about 4 flights to get from South Africa to England, which are stop off in Germany and all this stuff. And I get, it doesn't help that it's back-to-back weeks. You can't pre-book because you don't know whether you're going to win the game, where you're going to be. But, that is a fact of where we're at with the competition. People wanted the South African teams to join. Obviously, the South African teams wanted to join. They've added a huge amount of quality to the competition, but unfortunately, all 3 of their entries have gone out in the quarterfinals. Obviously, the Bulls went out in the last 16 as well, but rightly so. Munster fans could go, well, hold on a minute, we had to go over there last week, and no doubt the conditions affected them. So it goes both ways, but you make your luck, don't you? A bit of the time, and if you'd have qualified as Leinster had as first seeds, you get a home game all the way through to the final.
On the travel, right? And I'm a person that genuinely always has and always will suffer with travel, not just the size of the seats, but I feel rubbish. After I've travelled, I don't feel great. And this, like you just said there, we kind of knew that going into the Champions Cup, the URC. There's a number of things, right, to try and keep it positive, and we'll get onto that. But the negativities around this, and they need to sort it out, don't they? One is the carbon footprint. There's all this talk, not that I fly a lot, I travel a lot, so it's not me being hypocritical when I talk about it.
Corporate Jim here, come on.
No, that's James. That's Corporate James. This is I'm the middleman at the minute. But there is that. There's a carbon footprint that this is leaving on there, and we know that there's this big play globally around this stuff. But also, it's the travel. Like we've seen, Ivan Roos collapsed after being on a plane because he did something to his lung. Not that because he flew, but I'm telling you now that would have had something to do with it. Jake White as well got wheeled off the plane in a wheelchair, but I mean it was an underlying health condition, something to do with his appendix. And I'm not saying that these are the reasons why, but there is an element of kind of danger when you're an athlete and you're traveling that much, and you listen to people who are on the road in different industries, entertainment, comedy. I mean, they're obviously doing other things as well, as opposed to just eating and drinking. But like having to take IV drips and stuff like that because they've run down, their immune system's down. I'm going a little bit deep and I'm segueing here. I'm just telling you now that the kind of travel that these teams are doing, it isn't just the Champions Cup for the South African teams, remember. The URC, they're travelling every week as well, to Italy, to Scotland, to Wales, to Ireland as well. And they're not easy places to get to. Yes, the time zones are the same. Something needs to be done. Someone needs to call it out. Maybe I'm calling them out about it. But I just don't think it's sustainable because it does catch up on you at some point. And this is the whole thing of having the South African teams in. And also, Corporate James, this push to try and globalise the season, but then make these tournaments, and I'm segueing slightly again, Andrew, and we can go through it, and make these tournaments that align them, not go from the Six Nations into the URC, then into the Champions Cup, then into the URC, then into the Premiership, and then into the Champions Cup. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous for the players to deal with, and it's ridiculous with the amount of travel. They need to kind of segment what they're doing, make it easier for us to consume, but make it not safer, but just make the travel less for the players. It's absolutely ridiculous.
What I will say then, Jim, is I do remember in the sort of Hong Kong hangover few days after I got back, you're posting a picture of you and Sir Bill, weren't you?
Yeah, and he called me his vice captain. Yeah, that's Bill Beaumont, wide awake. He said he'd been awake for 2 weeks. So
you can talk about it on here, but there's the man, and we've spoken about it for a long time, haven't we? Around the global season, the calendar. We had Gus Pichot on here. There's been no change, right? There needs to be a big reset. Jim Hamilton, you work for World Rugby. Corporate James, and let's hear it. You and Bill.
World Rugby don't have a say. They're the governing body and the federation, if you like. It's like the EPCR, the Prem, the URC. Sanzar, they all work in their own different.
And that's what I'm saying. That's where World Rugby should be taking control of everything on a number of different things, centralising it to say this is the way that we're going to run the game from now on. If that is something that everyone is going to buy into, which they need to, don't they?
Pod.
Rugby pod.